Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem. And Jacob said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So Joseph went and found them. They saw him afar off and conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But Reuben said, Shed no blood. Cast him into this pit." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of the long robe with sleeves, and they cast him into a pit. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming. Judah said to his brothers, "Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites." So they drew Joseph up out of the pit and sold him for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Then they took Joseph's robe and killed a goat and dipped the robe in the blood and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. See whether it is your son's robe or not." And he recognized it. Then Jacob rent his garments and mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. This is the word of God for the people of God.
God gave Joseph a dream. It appears on the surface to be a dream about sibling rivalry, as if God agrees with Jacob, who is the father of these boys. Joseph is the favorite. He's got looks like it's a multicolored coat. Some people translate the Hebrew as it was long sleeves. See, what that would mean is if you have long sleeves, you work inside the house. The other brothers had short sleeves, which meant that they had to work out in the fields where the brambles might get hung in their long sleeves. They have class resentment, like within this one family. Is God underlining that yes, he will be the superior one? That's not actually what this dream that God gives Joseph is about. It's a dream about hope. It's a dream about there being enough for everybody over time. Dreams are interesting. I've sometimes thought, do I want God to give me a dream? Most of my dreams, I'll be honest with you, it's the same dream that you have in college, right? You dream in college that you wake up and, I've got an exam and it's in 5 minutes. I don't have time to get there. I forgot to study. I have the preacher version of this, which is I wake up and church has started and I think I can still get there by the sermon time, and then I can't find the church, and whatever that is. Is that a dream from God? Maybe it is. Maybe God gives me that dream and God's saying, you got some anxiety? You want to work on that with me? Dreams. Now, what do we dream and why? I've had 2 forthright God dreams in my life. One is, when I was in college, I was your basic heathen person. But I had some friends kept inviting me to church. So I finally went to this church, and I kind of liked it. But then they said, now we want you to come to a small group. It's like now we say to you, come to a small group. And you may feel like I did back then. It's like, you ought to be lucky I'm coming to church. Like, I'm not doing a small group. But this one guy kept telling me, join a small group, join a small group. I had a dream one night, and it was more real than the world I woke up to. And I don't know how I knew it was Jesus. And Jesus spoke to me and said, follow me. So I thought, I'll go to the small group once and see how that goes. So I go to the small group, I go to this guy's house, and we sit down, and I'm profoundly uncomfortable. And then I really got uncomfortable because this guy opened the Bible and he said, I want to talk today about when Jesus said, follow me. I'm like, oh my gosh. How do we follow Jesus? Part of following Jesus is dreaming God's dreams. We have dreams. There's all this stuff in society about if you dream it, it will come true. If you dream it and work hard, it will come true. This is a bunch of malarkey. When I was a kid, I dreamed I would be a second baseman for the Yankees or a shooting guard for the Celtics. It wouldn't matter how hard I worked. I just don't have the body for that. It's God's fault, really, nobody else's. It's a silly dream. How do we dream better dreams? I remember when Grace was a little girl, she was in the little ballerina class, and they had a little performance that we went to, and the the teacher wanted to go around and ask each little girl, what do you want to be when you grow up? So she comes to the first little girl. She says, what do you want to be? And I think the answer was supposed to be a ballerina. Instead, the little girl said, I want to be rich. And the mom sitting next to me turned this funny shade of red. Clearly, the dream in their house was like, we can be rich. This is not a wicked dream. How do we dream God's dreams? That's the question. That's what Martin Luther King did in this time of year, in August of the year 1963, when he spoke at the Lincoln Memorial. He had a dream. It wasn't his dream. It was God's dream that he was giving voice to. The Bible, we can even think of the whole Bible as a book of dreams. It's God's dream for us. We hear the shattered dreams of others. We hear the broken dreams of others. Part of dreaming God's dream is hearing carefully, as the Bible does, the crushed dreams of other people. There's so many people and their dreams are crushed. Sometimes we might hear it in something like a Broadway musical, like in Les Mis. Fantine, she's lost everything.
I dreamed a dream in time gone by, when hope was high and life worth living. I dreamed that love would never die. I dreamed that God would be forgiving. Then I was young and unafraid, and dreams were made and used and wasted. There was no ransom to be paid. Song unsung, no wine untasted. But the tigers come at night, with their voices soft as thunder, as they tear your hope apart. Turn your dream to shame.
Could you hear the pain, but then also the lingering hope in Fantine's crushed dream? You hear the words? There was a time when men were kind, when love was blind, when hope was high. This sounds like God's dream in the scriptures. There's something simple as when men were kind. If you want to know God's dream for you, it's stuff like Paul talked about the fruit of the Spirit. Here's what God dreams for us: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, or what Jesus said in the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount. But blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the peacemakers, right? What happens is we live in a society and we get duped into all kinds of other dreams, like I want to be rich, or it's political ideology. Like we have the dream that if my political guy wins, everything will just be great. But if the others win, it'll be catastrophe. I tell you this over and over because I love you. And you break my heart when I see you falling into this. Your political ideology and all the anger and rancor that's associated with that will not bring you any good and will not deliver the world. Just the way it is. God dreams for us to be holy. God dreams for us to be gentle. God dreams for our church to be a holy church, that we make a difference in the world, that we are the salt of the earth, that we are a light to the nations, even in an era like a pandemic, even especially in an era like this of the pandemic. Part of what's up to us as Christians to dream God's dream and to be the church that God dreams of is to hear those crushed dreams of others. I misspoke last week in my sermon. it's harder to do this than you think, especially to an empty room. I meant to say, as I'll say it now, I got another chance. In my notes it said, all lives matter. There's nothing more true than the people who say that all lives matter. They're absolutely right. And the way I think that works is that if all lives matter, since we can't get everything done at once, sometimes God calls us to focus on something. There's a lot of talk now about who can vote, or vote's going to be legit, and so on. 100 years ago, this is amazing to me, women could not vote. Like half the population could not vote. And the church and others stood up and said, we got to work on this now. All lives matter. So women have to vote. That's just profoundly wrong if women can't vote. Back in the 19th century, there weren't child labor laws. And kids were forced to work in factories, and that was just wrong. We're just ruining lives. We said, now's the time that we've got to stand up for that. World War II, Western civilization was at risk, and that wasn't the time to sit on our hands and say, well, yeah, kind of whatever, all lives matter, but the lives that matter right now are over in Europe and in the Pacific theater, and we got to do something about that. Sometimes it's something that you just have to focus on in your own life. You have a parent that's dying, or your marriage is falling apart. You got to deal with that now because all lives matter. Children's cancer. Ask my friend Meg McElwain about that. When your child has cancer, you realize that all lives matter. That's what we got to be focusing on right now. The Me Too movement, there's always been terrible problems with the way that women have been mistreated. But Harvey Weinstein came in the news and people woke up and they said, Me Too, we can't have this any longer. We got to deal with this because all lives matter. It seems to me, I don't know, that what God's asking of us right now has to do with race. It's alive in our country, and the question is, the church going to answer? Are we going to answer? We're going to deal with this reading a great book by Isabel Wilkerson called Caste. And she talks about how racism works. She says it's like if you live in an old house, at least I bought an old house. And I don't like to go down to the basement, because when I go down to the basement, you just don't know what I'm going to find. Half the time there's water that's not supposed to be there or whatever. And so we live in an old house, like you are an old house. Isabel Wilkerson says our country is an old house. When you live in an old house, you can't say, well, I didn't build the thing. The stuff that's down in the basement, the foundations, I didn't do that, so I don't have to deal with it. You better deal with it, and you better deal with it now, or it's just going to get worse, isn't it? She points out that when you go to the doctor will not treat you until you take that clipboard and you fill out what? It's not just your history, but your parents' history, your grandparents' history. Do you have diabetes in your family? Do you have heart disease in your family? You want the doctor to know that. You don't curl up in a ball in shame because you have diabetes in your family, but you need to deal with that in order to get better. I want to be a spiritually whole person, and so do you. Part of what we're being asked to deal with now, because all lives matter, is the whole thing of race. At John Lewis's funeral, I was really moved when James Lawson stood up and he read a poem by Langston Hughes that articulates God's dream. I dream a world where man, no other man will scorn, where love will bless the earth and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights our day. A world, I dream, where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth, and every man is free, where wretchedness will hang its head, and joy like a pearl attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream my world. Here's the amazing thing. Joseph's dream, it's not about that the brother's going to be cocky and rule over his brother. What it's doing is forecasting the end of the story. What happens at the end of the story, right? Joseph gets sold into slavery down in Egypt, and he goes down there, and there's going to be a great famine. God tells him about this. Turns out there's enough food for the whole world to survive this 7-year famine. Joseph is the one who knows, so he stores up the food, and there's enough food for everybody, including those brothers who don't have any food where they were. They come to Egypt, and they come and they ask him for food. Here's the thing. God has given us enough. How good of God to give us enough. There are enough resources for everybody. There's enough good in the world for everybody. There is enough love for everybody. It's not a shortage. We've got enough love. We've got enough resources. But I go back to that old Haitian proverb which says, God gives, but God doesn't share. God gives. God has given us enough. It's up to us to do the sharing. The question is, what are we going to do now about people that are hurting, who have crushed dreams? What about, somebody emailed me this week and said, are you concerned about African American children? Absolutely. Think about it in our school system right now. Children who are on the margins, who are disadvantaged. Like, we're all fretting over our little pods and play groups. No, as we should. That's like a real thing. But what about the kids that they don't have internet? The mom's working 2 jobs. There's enough for everybody, not just for us. It's a long-term promise, this dream that God gives to Joseph, is that in time, God's will be done. In time, God will bring all of us to God's good end. And we can trust that. There will be enough for me, for you, for everyone. Ours, in the meantime, is to listen, to dream, to love, to act, to live into God's dream. Thanks be to God.
I closed my eyes, drew back the curtains to see for certain what I thought I knew. Far, far away, someone was weeping, but the world was sleeping. Any dream will do. I wore my coat with golden lining, bright colors shining, wonderful and new. And in the east, the dawn was breaking, and the world was waking. Any dream will do. A crash of drums, a flash of light, my golden coat flew out of sight. The colors